You're muted, Merrie. Merrie, you're still muted.
We had a mute issue again. Okay, hello and welcome, and thank you, Valerie. Such beautiful playing. That's Dr. Valerie Whitney, and she is the Horn Professor at the University of British Columbia in Vancouver. And we are here for the fourth and final session of our Western Canada Brass Symposium for the Canadian Women's Brass Collective. We're live on YouTube and on Facebook today, and this whole day will be archived as 4 different sessions onto the website. So hopefully more folks will be able to enjoy some of these fabulous talks and presentations that we've had today on really, really exciting and interesting topics. So this final topic is about brass pedagogy. And before I introduce everybody who's on the panel here, well, actually, no, I'm going to introduce them. There's something else I want to say about the piece that Valerie was playing. It's by Erica Rahm, and it's called Confessions for St. Augustine. It's for solo horn. Beautiful, gorgeous piece and playing. And Erica Rahm is a well-known Canadian violinist, and she's a composer, and her mother, Elizabeth Rahm, very, very well-known composer, and in fact, the opening music that you hear for the Canadian Women's Brass Collective banner that shows at the beginning of all of our sessions is part of the fanfare that Elizabeth Rahm wrote. So really fun to have that connection there. So joining me on this session about brass pedagogy, we have Allene in Edmonton and Megan Evans in Edmonton, and of course, Valerie Whitney in Vancouver. My name is Merrie Classic, and I'm here in Victoria. I'm the trumpet professor at the university here, and the university stands on Lekwungen speaking territory. I want to acknowledge that because everything that we do, we are doing on land. So if we didn't have land, we wouldn't be here. And people have cared for that land. And I want to acknowledge the Esquimalt, Wasanich, and Songhees people who have cared for that land for thousands of years. And we are here as visitors, and it's really an honor to present and to be creative here. So in Edmonton, Allene and Megan are on Treaty 6 territory, and that's home of the Nahiwawak, Anishinaabe, and the Nisitapi, and the Métis, the Dene, and Nakota Sioux people. And Valerie is in Vancouver in Musqueam territory. So thank you all for being here. And in this hour, we're going to talk about actual brass playing. And some of the essential aspects of our routines, our philosophies. We've all had so many mentors and teachers throughout the years. We have some really key people that are foundational to how we think about brass playing. But we've also, had interactions with individuals at master classes or single one-off lessons, or even colleagues just talking about brass playing that have made lasting impacts on our playing and create these little light bulb moments for us to think about literally for years on a daily basis in what we want to do to keep things in check, to become the most efficient and effective musicians and artists that we can on our instruments. So the magic is in those small individual moments. And we're going to talk about some of these. We're going to talk about some concepts and the importance of having routines and the importance of efficiency, having a curious mind, and the desire to learn always. That learning curve never really stops. It never ends. We know this as musicians, and that's actually the joy of it, is that we know we'll only ever touch the tip of the iceberg in terms of what there is to know about playing our instruments. So I think we're going to keep it casual, and we'll just kind of go around the circle a couple of times. And maybe we'll start by talking, if some of you want to, about a daily routine essential, something that you feel is fundamental to getting you started on the right foot in the right way every day. Do you want to start us off, Valerie?
Sure. Yeah, happy to. Let's see. I have to pick just one here, so I'll pick my go-to if there's nothing else that I do for a warm-up session. If I'm, heaven forbid, running late to a gig, or I don't have quite the amount of time to warm up, the one thing that I will always do is my 3-octave harmonic series. Through the range of the horn. And this was something that I started doing. I kind of took private lessons off and on when I was in high school, so I didn't really start studying really regularly until I started university. And so my teacher in undergrad kind of day one set me on track with these daily harmonic series lip slurs. And I think for horn players especially, the harmonic series is, I find, really important to know where we are, because we are, we have this reputation of of being a really difficult instrument, and I tell people all the time, it's not that hard. You just have to understand how it works. And so my 3-octave harmonic series is what I do. It helps me to know kind of where my chops are that day, and it helps me to kind of just align where I'm. If I'm. Most of the time I find that I'm playing really efficiently on the ascent, and on the descent I'm doing something differently. So it helps me to kind of just calibrate and really get back into, just alignment for the day. That's kind of my daily checkup. It gets me through the registers of the instrument. And I always want to do flexibility before I do anything kind of articulated or punchy or anything, which I do move into later, but I always start with my flexies.
Nice. Yeah, I just realized we have 3 horn players on this panel and 1 trumpet. And I have to say, it's impressive and inspiring to hear the flexibility that you guys have with such an incredible range on the instrument. How about you, Allene? Is there something you want to share?
Yeah, it's interesting what you just said, Valerie, about feeling like you're really doing well and connected on the way up, but that the downward slurs don't always naturally line up as easily. That's something I've been noticing lately in my own playing. It's like I support really well when I'm slurring in an upward direction, but when I'm going down, my air wants to just be lazy. So I don't know, that's an interesting thing I've been thinking about lately. But for my routine, I start like if I'm running short on time, the like truncated version of my warm up is about 20 minutes. And on a normal day when I have enough time, it'll be about 40 minutes. And I feel like after 20 minutes, it becomes less about warming up and more about just like covering fundamentals. But what I start with is, and what I like to try and get lined up in that first session of the day is just connecting the air and the response of the horn right away. And then, you know, when you sort of get connected with that on the simplest level, then you can take it out into the outer ranges. And so I do, like, the first thing I do, well, after doing a little bit of buzzing, is just a basic response exercise from that Vern Reynolds horn handbook, which is like, you just put your metronome on 60 and you just play like a middle C for 4 beats and rest for 4 beats. And then you play a semitone higher for 4 beats and rest for 4 beats. And so, you know, just building in right from the beginning, that concept of work and rest, and then response, and having the metronome on is key, because you have to get the note to speak at that right moment. And I don't know, I feel like so much of what we do as horn players in the orchestra is just going like, da, at the perfect time, in the perfect way. So that's how I start up. And I just think about committing with my air to the front of the note to get it started. So not relying on my tongue to get the vibration of the note going. And also then just trying to like be present in my body and what am I doing? Like, am I tense here? Or, you know, just sort of being aware of what's going on. So I start with like really simple stuff like that.
Really cool. Yeah, very, very similar ideas. Maybe I'll just jump in first, Megan, if that's okay, because what Allene was talking about is really something that I have been doing and thinking about in my own playing every day out of necessity, and that's response. I don't know if Fu-Pu 2 rings a bell for anybody here. Maybe it's a trumpet thing. But I saw on the internet just a little while ago, it was a non-music feed that somebody said, if you could meet your 18-year-old self and you could say 3 words, what would they be? And but the response that I put on that, you know, was so esoteric, like nobody commented and they all thought, I don't know what she's talking about. I should put it onto a trumpet for him. But it was start practicing stamp. You know, because really it's life-changing. And this Fu-Pu 2 is one of his concepts. He writes about it right at the beginning of his book, the stamp book. So basically it's like, so you're doing just air and then just P as in the lips together, starting that note, the response, and then the T. Now, ultimately, all 3 of those sound identical, right? And very, very quietly. And I really find that I need to work on that response, that very, very, you know, intuitive moment of sound production where the wind passes through the lips and actually creates the vibration of sound at a very quiet dynamic for a little while, you know, in my warm up now. Otherwise, my lips will swell, and you know, I have full lips, so that has happened easily for me, you know, my whole playing career. And so this has really been a game changer to think of this Fu-Pu 2 and then do some lip bends, but at a very quiet dynamic. Now, everybody knows that I'm a Chickowitz student, and you know, full, rich, vibrant, you know, lyric sound is at the core of everything that we do. And this doesn't negate that. It's just that I need to get things going with response first, and then I can move into the VC studies. But that Fu-Pu 2 and then some lip bends, again, at a very quiet dynamic, are really, really foundational for how I get that sense of efficiency happening. How about you, Megan?
Well, it's funny, you know, you're all say, what is the most important thing? I'm like, yes, all those things are exactly what I think. But what first came to mind for me that I've sort of encountered in the last little while that's important for me to do every day is some long tones. And I never really did that as a student or even as a young professional. But now I really feel like I need to get to those long tones almost every day, if not every day. The response at the beginning of the long tone, crescendo, diminuendo, to get to the top of my dynamic and back down again, to control my air, to have it be smooth in that way. To me, it touches kind of everything I need to do and sort of gets me where I need to be. So I've sort of, nobody wants to do long tones, right? It's kind of the worst, and it's the first thing to go when you are running late. But if I leave it more than a few days, I find I have to get back to it right away, or else something is missing. My flexibility goes, the response goes, my intonation goes, everything is gone. Suddenly I can't play anymore. So that's it for me, is those long tones. Sadly, I hate to admit it, but it's true. So that's why, along with everything you guys are saying too.
I'm right with you. I've noticed in the last year or so, actually, in about the last year, since lockdown happened and I kind of stopped playing, that the long tones, I kind of go, why do I just feel yucky? Like, why is nothing working? Why is the horn feel foreign to me? And I sat down with a tuner and did some long tones, and trying to get the tuner to stay, it's like, it can be a really like demoralizing experience when you haven't done it for a while. But I find that actually the way that I can engage myself in long tones is to sit with a tuner and kind of make a game of it and see how steady I can get it. Because I don't know what has changed over time, but I do find that, like you, Megan, I really need to do long tones, and I'm starting to practice what I preach more now.
Actually,
sorry, Merrie. I've been doing long tones that I think are from Bill Vermeulen, where there's like a sequence of sort of tones that you do. Do you know this one, Valerie? Mr. Vermeulen's long tones?
Probably, if it's the same one I'm thinking of.
Yeah, you kind of do like a mezzo, forte attack, and then you do a forte piano attack, and then you do a quarter note piano, quarter note forte, quarter note piano, and then quarter note forte, quarter note piano, quarter note forte, and then you do a long tone.
Okay.
That sounds really similar to the Merrie Franquin book for trumpet, which is less known. Like, everybody thinks of Arbens, but the Franquin came out at about the same time, and very, very similar to what you're describing, Megan. Valerie, you mentioned holding those long tones, as evenly as you can. Is there a particular app that you use to visualize?
Yes, I got the tonal energy. It actually has they've developed the app so that it's has a lot more features than it used to, but I started using the tunable, actually, which I find more infuriating in a good way than tonal energy, because the tuner, it just graphs it slightly differently. So for me, what I've noticed is that sometimes I'll get a shake in the tone. Yeah. So even if the intonation is fine, the sound still wavers a little. I'm not sure. I'm still trying to figure out what that is. Probably too much coffee, frankly. So I'm dialing down my coffee intake in the morning right now. But the tunable app has a little line that shows you how steady your tone is.
Yeah.
As well. So it's not just the intonation, but it's So that's the one that I've been using more, because I find that the way it's set up is it actually works better for me than tonal energy. But they're both.
Yeah, it was a one player in the symphony here, Mike Oswald, that introduced me to tunable. I was like, "What is that you're doing?" Yeah. And game changer. Yeah. Really, really nice. So, yeah.
I don't know the tunable, but I like to use the analysis function on the tonal energy app, and that like shows you all the little wobbles and the pitch and it's a little bit information overload. Sometimes I can't because I just get too like, but I find that really helpful for noticing, like, you can see the shapes of the fronts of your notes really clearly when you look at those kind of graphing things. And that to me is super interesting. Like, then you can really visually see, am I committing to the front of the note with my hair, or am I sneaking in there and doing a little toit,
Right.
Yep. Yeah, exactly. And you're right. You hit the nail on the head. Like, it's air that is creating that front of the note, never the tongue. It's an illusion that we're doing these crisp, clear, hard articulations. That's achieved with the air, as we all know. I just did a little tutorial on articulation for Bach, for their online content and stuff, and that's exactly what I'm talking about. So I wonder now maybe about moving to a tip that you think about in your playing, like not necessarily at the beginning of your day, but maybe during your practice, no matter what music you're playing. Is there some kind of concept, either that you learned from one of your teachers or from a colleague or recently or a long time ago, that you'd like to share with us? Allene, do you want to start?
Sure. I mean, I've been sort of practicing more during this pandemic time than I have in quite a number of years, because I'm not so busy working. Playing less, yet practicing more. So there's been a whole bunch of thoughts I've had bouncing through my head as I've sort of delved more into the practice room. But what I've been thinking about lately is trying to get rid of tension in the body and directing my energy towards, like, how can I use tension in my body to create the right kind of resistance, and to be free to let go of the wrong kind of tension. So for me, that's been like focusing on directing my breath more downward in the body, rather than, because I tend to hold a lot of tension up in my shoulders, my neck and jaw. And, you know, we get so like up here, everything's up here, you know, and so trying to direct my attention more downward towards the lower abdominal area, I sort of think of it as like where my, like between my hip bones, like even sort of lower than, not your abs, but down there. And so I've been working a lot with that idea of like taking more air, using more air, and directing my attention down there. So like when I'm practicing a long tone with, like, I'm like you, Megan, I didn't really do a lot of long tones when I was younger. And the older I get, the more I see the value in them, though they don't become funner, that's for sure. But when I think about, like, when you do the big starting soft and the big crescendo in the middle, if I think about controlling that big crescendo with my lower abdominal area and move my focus down there, it's so much better and more stable for me. And so I've been trying to work with that idea a lot recently, and then trying to let go of some of the tension in the jaw, neck, shoulders. Like, as a high horn player, I feel like I've developed a lot of bad habits over the years of like a really heavy work playing schedule, having to play high and just get through weeks and weeks of tough stuff. So now I'm trying to like undo some of that. And so yeah, I've been working with that idea, but I'd love to hear what your guys' experiences are.
Yeah, for sure. Valerie, did you want to go on to that?
Sure. Yeah. I guess this is maybe more of a kind of a practice technique that I've been using more recently than anything, but this idea of interval training on the instrument, as well as an athletic kind of athletic training, body training thing. I started doing this several years ago when I was actually working out regularly. Not right now, unfortunately, but doing actual really concerted interval training. And I don't know if I read an article in the IHS or where I got this idea, but I got this idea from somewhere, so it's not mine, that said, why don't we apply interval training to playing the instrument when we're practicing? Because, you know, when you're in the orchestra, you get those natural moments of rest built in. But when we're in the practice room, and I'm mostly in the practice room, you know, I don't have a regular playing job. So I'm mostly in the practice room, and I find that, gosh, 25 minutes can go by and I haven't stopped. So what I do now is I use my tomato timer, the app on here, the Pomodoro technique, you know, and I actually just set it for like 4 minutes and 1 minute, or 3 minutes and 2 minutes, so that when the timer goes off, the horn comes off the face, so that I'm not, you know, over playing. And I found actually that this year especially, I think things were really busy here at you know, for the academic schedule this year. It was a lot of extra work. And so I felt like what I found myself doing was trying to pack a lot of practicing into a short amount of time, which about halfway through the year, I realized, this doesn't work, actually. I need to be a little bit more sensitive to my body and what I can actually do in a short period of time. And so that was when I started building in more rest. And so what I'll do is, for the 3 or 4 minutes, the horn will be mostly on my face, but during the time when it's kind of the non-playing time, I'll either do some breathing exercises, or I'll, you know, novel idea, I'll actually do some singing and sing through the music, and, you know, do verbal practicing rather than on the horn practicing. And that's actually been a really transformative. I don't know that that's necessarily a new idea, but it's something that I've found really useful recently, and I've been able to go for longer, and actually my practicing is a lot more productive because I'm singing more than doing things out on the internet.
Yeah, singing. So, that's awesome.
Yeah.
That's super. How about you, Megan?
Well, it's kind of interesting. I've noticed a few changes in the last year on my playing, and I kind of attribute it to a few different factors. I think one thing that happened is, I play second horn in the Edmonton Symphony, and I play symphonic music, and I prepare those concerts. But this last year, it's been a lot of solo playing because every opportunity is a solo performance or nothing, or an etude, or I'm preparing a solo for fun. But there's also been a lot of playing in my tiny studio in my room. And so I've kind of noticed a bit of a change in the way that I'm using my air, in a negative way at the beginning, and now in a more positive way. Because I'm playing more solistically, I have to be more aware of my air and my breathing and the way that I'm moving my air and using my air. And then I became aware, okay, you're playing in these tiny rooms, you need to move your air more, faster, project better, use your air better. So there's been a few really interesting discoveries I've made. One of the really interesting things to me, which I'd never even crossed my mind, is I played a lot of solo repertoire with our chief conductor accompanying me on the piano. And he's got a real interest in vibrato. And so he encouraged me to play with some vibrato, add some vibrato to my playing, which changes the way that you move and use your air. And so now when I play, whether with or without vibrato, I feel like my air is moving a little bit differently, and I've been thinking about it differently. And so it's interesting. There's been so many changes in my playing, and I've been thinking a lot about air and talking a lot with my students about how to move your air faster, better, more efficiently. And it's been really interesting. I've really, really enjoyed working on all that kind of stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, cool. One of the things that I did during this pandemic, and Valerie, you're right, for the academic world, like it's actually been busier. I know that a lot of folks in, full-time orchestras or brass quintets, suddenly your seasons were canceled and you had to, be your own time manager as far as, covering all the basics. I always tell my students, that these hundreds and hundreds of trumpet players that suddenly, thousands really, were without work, not one of them said, now I get to practice all these solos. All of them were like, now I get to practice basics, right back to the basics. And we've just been witnessing some fabulous things. I'm sure it's the same in the horn world on the internet, of people just, starting notes and just playing single pitches and things. And it's awesome. But anyway, one of the things that I did last summer to challenge myself was, and to grow, was I booked a couple of lessons with Tom Hooten, who is the principal trumpet in the LA Philharmonic, and very, very forefront on the trumpet pedagogy scene. We have very different backgrounds. Tom is younger than I am, but I love the way that he thinks about teaching and the way that he wants to share all his knowledge. So I researched everything I could of all the free stuff he has online, which is huge. Now there's even more. And then I booked 2 private lessons with him. And the reason I researched all that stuff first is so that I didn't need to waste my money or his time by listening to the concepts that I could get for free from him, right? So he could focus and hone in immediately on aspects of my playing that needed work. And one thing that he identified immediately, which was exactly what I wanted to hear and what I needed to hear, was that, I had cultivated accuracy by just practicing a lot in a certain way that was a little bit inefficient, in that I was playing in a big range. Now, those of you who know my teaching, like I'm always talking about horizontal plane and all the notes are forward and back and there is no up and down. But there was still a next step that I could take with this concept. And so he described it as everything being in a much smaller dimension. And I kind of equated that with the kids in the hall thing, where you like squish the head. I'm squishing your head right now, Allene. And so what that means is that if you're thinking of something in a far dimension, that whole range becomes in a very, very small zone, right? If a tree trunk is right here in front of me, it's very large. But the tree that I'm looking outside there fits into that tiny little space. And that is the entire range of the trumpet, right? From a pedal C up to a super G. So if I think of that, and actually I just thought of this, but I'm going to illustrate this with my little pandemic stick. Can you still hear me okay? Okay, so this is 2 meters long, everybody. And we had these so we could, make sure that everybody was correctly distanced. But I snagged one of them so that I can keep it forever. And basically, if you think of the natural angle of the trumpet being this, because that's how you're holding it, I equate it to the angle of a fighter jet landing, right? Then high notes are down there. They're far away because the wind is fast. And low notes are up here, and the funnel kind of goes like this. And they're because it's slower wind, and they're closer. But everything is on this tiny little dimension, and this is kind of like a leveler, like in those car racing like things where they have to get on that bridge and keep it level. Like the tiniest little movements are going to make a huge impact. So if I think of that tiny movement instead of this kind of thing, right? Like high notes, low notes, opposing direction is something I'm talking about peripherally right now, but really it's that small dimension of the leveler, Anyway, so that's what I am thinking about literally all the time. How can I keep everything within a smaller dimension and improve accuracy and everything?
Interesting. That's good food for thought. I'm going to take that.
So, we just have a few minutes left. Actually about 10 minutes. So we have a couple minutes each. Do you guys have a personal story that you might want to share from your primary teacher or anybody that has been influential in your life? Valerie, do you want to start?
Sure. Actually, I'm gonna go back to my high school band teacher. Actually, because this is somebody who had an enormous influence on my musical understanding, and I still attribute him as the one who really taught me how to emotionally engage with music, which I think is really the key to being able to communicate what it is that we have to say, like we were talking about in earlier sessions. I remember, I was learning the romanza from the second Mozart concerto. I think it was whichever one it was. It was a romanza, and I don't know what I was doing, but I just remember him. I was in grade 6 or 7 at the time, and he. I don't know what I was doing, but he said, "You have to play this like you're in love. It's romance." And of course, to a middle schooler, it's like, in love. I didn't really know what to do with that at the time. I just remember this, the way that he explained how to emotionally connect with the music was something that has stuck with me, and I think really, I think that was kind of I remember that conversation vividly. I remember that lesson vividly, and while I was a little, bashful and awkward about the topic, it was a time that really ignited a understanding of how I can connect and communicate through the horn in a way that was more than just playing, sound at it. So, I say that in answer to your question, but also as an exhortation to any band directors who might be watching this, that these are formative years that you're working with, and he didn't necessarily get my love of the horn, though he encouraged that, but it was all around music, and understand how I could relate and communicate through that medium. So. That's nice.
Yeah, that's fantastic. It's hard as a teacher too to know how much to focus on the, impressing the importance of that artistry and that emotive quality, which is of course the ultimate goal. The only reason we're trying to get good at an instrument is so that we can have something to say, and it's hard to know the balance sometimes of focusing on the actual function of the instrument or really encouraging that artistry. Because in some ways, the function, is something that an individual has to make that choice themselves, to jump into that as a life practice, right? But in some ways, too, the artistry is something that can only be absorbed by an individual choice, too. So you were obviously receptive to what your teacher had said, and that seed had been planted already for you. So, but absolutely, music teachers, they're the reason we're here.
Yeah, sure.
and that is just a fact. So I was mistaken about the time, and we're a little bit more relaxed. We have until 4:45. And so that's wonderful. Megan, did you want to go on to a story that is meaningful for you?
Sure, I'd love to. The thing that my teacher said to me that sticks in my mind the most and that I remember the most often, my university teacher was John Zerbel, the former principal horn of the Montreal Symphony Orchestra. And the thing he said to me that I always remember is he said, "You make every note a universe." So every note is special and deserves your attention and all the beauty that you can put into it. And whenever I remember that in my playing, it becomes so much more joyful and easy. Even fast notes, slow notes, every note deserves all your love and attention. Mm-hmm. So I'll never forget that. And I always tell my students that. They're probably tired of hearing it. Probably John only told me once, but I tell my students every lesson. And the other thing that I wanted to share that my teacher told me that made a huge impact was when I finished my studies with him at McGill at the end of my master's, I didn't have a job and I didn't know what I was doing and I didn't know if I was good at the horn or I didn't know what I was doing, and I thought, I should study more. I should get another teacher. He said, "You have everything you need now. Just go practice. You know how to do it. You've learned enough. You have it inside you. Go." And then I saw him a year later and he said to me, "You improved more in 1 year than you did the whole 5 years you studied with me." So I don't know. Good job.
Yeah.
And that was so empowering. And I felt ever since then, I take lessons from time to time, Merrie, as well. I've had lessons every summer with Denise Tryon. Do you know Denise, Valerie?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Fabulous. Amazing. But I always know if I encounter a problem in my playing or I need to overcome something that I have inside me, the knowledge and what I need to kind of get it. So those are good memories from my teacher.
Yeah, that's fantastic. And it kind of brings home what we all know to be true, that ultimately we are our own teachers. I have that in my course outline, in my teaching philosophy, that really as a teacher, I'm a mentor, and my job is to empower an individual to recognize their own potential to be their own teacher, because we've all just jumped in 1,000% into trying to hone this craft, and it's not for anybody else, right? It's, of course, we're in the entertainment industry, and it's for the audience that we're creating the magic, but this sense of accomplishment and focus and achievement on our actual craft is for us. So we have to be our own teacher. Allene, how about you?
Yeah, well, I don't know. I'm so interested in so much that you guys have been saying. I just wanted to respond to a couple of things that came before, like that, what John Zerbel said about making every note a universe. I really like that concept because it keeps you really grounded in the present moment too. And music being as it is, it's an art form that exists in a specific moment of time and then is over. I feel like it's really important to not get too far ahead of ourselves. Of course you want whatever piece you're performing to have the proper arc and pacing and all that. But I feel like staying with each note is so powerful, that concept, because it is that note at that moment in time is really the most important thing. It's the sound that's happening. It's not so I really like that. And then I was gonna say, Merrie, so through this COVID time, one of the challenges I found is finding some musical inspiration, because, normally when we're working, I'm inspired by my colleagues and guest artists who come through and the music that we play, but all that sort of has disappeared. And so I've been kind of searching for some sources of inspiration. And Tom Hooten is one of the ones that I've found, and I enjoy watching his Instagram stuff. And he mentioned a concept a while back in one of his posts, what he called reckless practice. And I was like, what does he mean by that? But I feel like that's an important one. It's like taking some risks, and maybe that might result in making an ugly sound or making a crack or something like that, but to learn something new, to stretch yourself. And I feel like that really resonated with me, because I feel like as a principal horn, I spend so much time trying to just not screw up. You know what I mean? It's like, you don't miscount your entrance, just stay on, just get it done, you know? And so the concept of reckless practice is like, okay, I'm actually not going to worry about accuracy right now. I'm going to focus on my air. And if I crack every other note, it's okay. You know? So that was one of the concepts that he raised that I thought was interesting. And you can kind of take it not just to accuracy, but to a lot of different things, and just like being a little bit more wild with your experimentation. And I like that. But in terms of, I don't have a good story, but sort of a lesson from my teacher. And I was just thinking about one of the big concepts that my dad, who was my first teacher, loves to talk about, is what he called the balance of resistance. So, you know, we need resistance to play, to create the vibration, you know, coming from the resistance of the horn, the vibration of the lips, and then the airstream moving to activate that vibration. I feel like the whole job of playing a brass instrument is creating the right amount of resistance to create the vibrations without creating excess tension. And so just like balancing that concept every single day in every single thing we do. And it can get off so easily. And I feel like the disadvantage we have as brass players, as opposed to a string player, the resistance is there. You tighten your string or you loosen your string, and your bow is there, and you can see that this contacts this and vibrates. But for us, it's all in our bodies, and the resistance, you know, there's resistance in your throat that you can use to get a faster airspeed to play high. And I think that sometimes it tips over the border into tension really easily. But I feel like actually being able to use some resistance in the throat and soft palate area is a valuable tool to have in your toolkit. But just knowing like when those things are happening and when it's too much, so that you can feel like, okay, I'm using resistance and strength here so that I can be free and relaxed here, you know, and having the aperture being free to vibrate. You need to have tension in your corners. You need to have support in your core. You need to have the resistance of the horn to blow against. And so just balancing all those things, that's kind of the main concept that I took away from him. And you can apply a lot of things to it. So that's kind of one of the big lessons.
For sure. And that, of course, is the whole wind and song premise too. I like to talk about that concept. I think it's in some ways widely misunderstood, you know, in that it was never intended by Jacobs or Chikowitz to mean the biggest, fullest, most energized wind sound that you can make all the time. It was just the required amount of wind to make the sound that you want to make, you know, and that concept of efficiency. But specifically, Allene, you were talking about tension, and you know, when students have or any of us have some kind of inefficiency, or something is coming into the sound that is not optimal, right? And it'll show up in the sound first. That's our litmus test for everything, is sound. Then it's usually tension. But we can't just say, well, just, you know, get rid of that tension, because there has to be tension somewhere. There has to be resistance somewhere. So where are the safe places for that to be? And of course, like you already mentioned, that's in the abs, the core, and in the corners. So if we can, instead of trying to get rid of that tension, just refocus it to where it can be useful for us, then it's just super exciting. Just to finish off this question that I asked about a little story of somebody, I'm going to go to Mr. Chikowitz, because, you know, he's just has such an impact on everybody. I don't know if other people feel this way that are maybe not trumpet players in the brass world, but I suspect it may be true, that the presence that he has in his teaching and just in his persona is so reassuring. And it's really remarkable that he had that gift. And interestingly, you know, I'm coming back to Thomas Hubel, who I mentioned in an earlier session, who is not a musician, but rather a spiritual teacher, really. And he was talking about being an effective facilitator, or an effective counselor, an effective teacher, and, you know, what that requires in terms of energetic work. And he said, if the teacher's nervous system can feel your nervous system, then they can become an open instrument and they can work with that. And that was the gift that Mr. Chickowitz had, is that he was able to absorb what we were feeling in our nervous system as an individual in that moment without giving away his own power. That never would have happened. It just was a natural ability that he had to be present. And there was a moment in one of my lessons at Northwestern that really rang home with this. And I think about it, and I tell this story a lot when I'm speaking at conferences and things, is, I was playing something and it wasn't going how I wanted to. And I was responding in a certain way. And he sat back in his chair and folded his arms like he did. Everybody who knows Mr. Chickowitz can visualize it. And he said to me, "I want to know what you did so terrible in this world that you're not allowed to miss a note." And it was a great thing to say, because it's like, how is this productive? Like, why are you being so hard on yourself? Is that really making you a better player? And of course, we know that it doesn't. And it's easier said than done to just let go of that kind of self-criticism, but really, really important. And that's all he had to say. And I have remembered it for almost 30 years. Well, not quite. So it's really, great to have those moments from our teachers. And we actually do have a little bit more time to talk about some ideas. Allene, you were talking a lot about resonance. Vibration actually is the word that you used. Do you guys mind if I just kind of go on that for a second, and then we can talk about other stuff as well? But vibration is everything. Of course, we're creating the sound, right, with our lips. But it's also every other part of our body that is involved in that efficiency. And there's two things that have really been interesting for me to think about in the last couple of years, especially with regards to that vibration. One is something that Tom Hooten talks about, and I don't know if he made this up or if he got it from somebody, but he calls it lip fry. So when we think lip fry, we think, oh, my lips are fried, I'm super tired. But it's not about that at all. It's more related to vocal fry, which is the nemesis of vocalists, when your voice basically cracks, or if we go, ah. So that's vocal fry, the smallest amount of vibration necessary to create a sound. So when we think of that in terms of the lips, and just the mouthpiece having contact, like 4 points of contact, like 4 bedposts. Paul Markello introduced that to me. Bing, 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 bing. Then we have that contact in order to create the lip fry. So playing with the minimum vibration possible is not about range, because in fact, thinking about this and how much I don't need to press on the air and how much I don't need to press on the instrument, but how much it just has to have that contact and the wind speed to match the vibration of the lips, literally increased my range by 3 semitones overnight. It was really, really interesting.
Well, it sounds like you're talking about increasing efficiency by just like doing less.
Yeah.
And that's an interesting concept. I mean, there's a lot of different ways to skin a cat. You can use a lot of effort to play, and some people just seem to use no effort at all to like do the hardest things. So
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Well, I wanted to share, I saw a really interesting talk on this Northwest Horn Symposium that happened online a few weeks ago. This guy, Frankie Losurdo, he's a horn player in Australia, and he has a site called Brass Rehab where he helps brass players with injuries, because he went through like an overplaying injury and got his playing back by working with this doctor there in Australia. And so now he helps other people with similar injuries. And I found his talk really interesting because he kind of got into the physiology of breathing and support in a way that's more scientific than I think we get a lot in music school. Everyone's like, use your diaphragm, support. And you're like, okay, I think I'm doing that now. Like, what it feels like to play when it feels supported. But it's not always an easy thing to describe how to do it. So anyway, in this video, he describes how to take a good breath. And like he said, support actually doesn't really come from the diaphragm because that's not a muscle we can consciously control that easily. It's more from the lower abdominal area and the whole muscular area around the middle, like between your rib cage and your hips. And so that was super interesting to me. And he just talks about like the muscles in the face and some exercises you can do to strengthen and how they work. So I really liked that. I will share the link, and maybe it can go in the chat, but I thought that was super interesting. And and hearing him, like he did a before and after video of like when his chops kind of fell apart, and then now how he can play and how he can fix it, how he could fix it is really amazing. Because I would think, oh gosh, how do you come out from that? But yeah, it's really cool.
Yeah, great. And actually our behind the scenes people are so on top of it. They're sharing all the links for everything we're talking about. So thank you to the behind the scenes folks. We'll do a proper thank you at the end. How about you, Valerie? Is there anything that comes to mind you want to share?
Well, I just kind of what you're talking about, getting balance of resistance, Allene, like you mentioned there. What I say to my students, we as horn players, we're so worried about cracking a note and not being that one player to do it, but I think we get so kind of neurotic about it. And when my students are getting kind of frustrated about this whole accuracy thing, I say essentially what you said, Allene. I say the reason you missed the note, it's not because you're a bad person. You can't play the horn. You just got the ratio wrong, right? It's in some ways, brass playing is about mathematics, and it's just for a second line G, the ratio is this, and for an octave higher than that, the ratio is double that. So it takes the subjectivity out of it, and in some ways making it more of a scientific mathematical equation. You don't want to go too far in that direction, but if I crack a note that I've played 1,000 times before every day, the easiest open note on the instrument, it's just because I wasn't thinking about the really lining up the ratio exactly, and a fraction off can impact it. So it's nice to kind of take it out of our own personal value.
You two are such nice teachers. I always say to my students, it's like throwing darts at a dartboard. And a D, it's a triple 20. Just keep throwing. Sometimes you get it, sometimes you miss. The more darts you throw, the better your chance you're going to hit it.
Right.
Sometimes you miss.
Yeah,
that's very scientific. I never really thought
sometimes,
of that before.
When we learn a new thing too, we become more efficient, and then we crack like the easiest things.
Yeah.
Actually, many times throughout today, I've thought of my friend Karen Donnelly, who is, as we know, the mastermind behind the Canadian Women's Brass Collective. And in this particular moment, I remember her telling a story of when she had just gone down to take a lesson with Jacobs and come back to her awesome job in the National Arts Center Orchestra as principal trumpet. And, she cracked like a, third line B or something, mezzo forte. But she had gained some kind of efficiency that was then blossoming into a new thing, really awesome.
Yeah.
Megan, is there something you wanted to share?
I'm not sure this ratio concept is so interesting to me. I've never actually considered it exactly that way before, but now that you two have mentioned it, it makes perfect sense, and I really, really like that idea. But I've been talking so much with my students about air and projection lately, and so that's sort of the way that I've been going with my students, and really trying to get them to imagine, Merrie, that example with the stick, when you think about the horn all unrolled, it's such a long instrument, and the amount of air that you need to move and vibration that you need to move in order to get out the horn and to the back of the hall. You can't be playing inside a 9x9 practice room thinking that way. You've got to move your air out and into the world, to your audience. So that's kind of where I've been focusing with my students. But it's so good to hear all these concepts from you, both of you and three of you. It's awesome.
Well, it's great. It's like these sessions are great for people to listen in on, but I get excited with these kind of conversations because it's like, oh, I'll take that, and I'll take that, and that, and I feel like I have a few more tools to think about in my own practice, and then kind of play with it a little bit, and then take it.
Yeah, absolutely. And when this is posted up on the on the website, you know, people can just have it playing while they're making dinner or whatever. It's really nice. It's a nice resource to have. I've really enjoyed a lot of the things, especially, to be honest, the interviews that have appeared on the on the internet during the pandemic. My friend Mark Doolin in Atlanta has done something called Mark's Mouthpiece. I did not understand like the cleverness of this title until I said to my kids, I don't know why it's called Mark's Mouthpiece. And they said, because he's interviewing people. But anyway, literally every single week, there's been somebody else, you know, from the brass world, mostly trumpet players. And I just love listening to those stories and those personal anecdotes from their careers, and also a lot of good information about playing as well. So I think at this point, I just want to say thank you to a whole bunch of people. I want to thank you guys for being part of this panel. And thank, of course, everybody who's been part of this fabulous day. It's really, really been an inspiration and refreshing, rewarding in so many different ways just to spend this time together and talk. We could do this all day, I know, for days and weeks on end. I also really want to say a big thank you to the people behind the scenes that have made this particular day work, which is Louise Hayerhoff and Jesse Brooks. And they are in Ontario right now, and they're running all the technical aspects of this this programming. And it makes such a huge difference for us as presenters to just be able to talk. There's this amazing platform we've been using called StreamYard. And the other person back there in the backstage room in StreamYard right now is Karen Donnelly. And Karen has created the Canadian Women's Brass Collective. She's the first to say that it takes a village. It's all a big team, but really we are so grateful for what you have, what you've provided here, Karen. And thanks for the banners too. So really, really wonderful to be part of this organization and to be part of this increasing visibility, increasing mentorship. There is another CWBC event coming up, and it's going to be a focus on youth and young professionals and all of the beautiful insights that they can offer us from their perspective. So that will be sometime in July. So we're going to close with some music. It's the little excerpt from when Allene and Megan played the John McPherson Concerto for Two Horns with a small chamber group with the Edmonton Symphony as part of the pandemic this year. And we'll just have a few minutes of that beautiful performance. So thank you again, everybody, and keep inspired, play with passion, because that's what she said.